Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. It's no secret that drugs are a serious issue in this country, and the Northeast Kingdom is not exempt. Today's guest is Barbara Morrow. She's here today to talk about the Prescription Drug Take-Back Program. Welcome to the show, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Scott.
I think it's a great program you're doing because, throughout the years, we've been told to do different things with our unused drugs. Like it wasn't, maybe only 2-3 years ago, we were told to flush them down the toilet.
Right.
Not a good idea, right?
No more.
Right.
So I can expand upon that a little bit for you if you want. What we know now is that when we put those drugs down the toilet, unfortunately they get into the water supply, either private or municipal. So we would never want to do that. We would never want to flush those things down the toilet.
Right. Yeah, because our municipal water systems, ours as in our sewer systems, they do a great job at removing so much of the stuff. But the one thing it has a difficult time doing is removing the drugs. Particularly, I learned in a class that I took was birth control pills. It goes right through. So what happens is the rivers, as particularly where the water's coming out of the sewer system, you have a lot of like amphibians and even some fish that are deformed because of the hormones from those pills.
Yep, that would be right. And as we learn more about how other drug concoctions affect the environment, we know that there are other kinds of prescriptions, even blood pressure, what we think are innocent, can affect the water supply and quantity. So it's just something that we want to stay away from.
How did they finally decide to make this decision? Because I remember, not to put it in the water system, because I remember learning the impact of putting it in the water years ago, but it seems like it took years before we finally decided to do something different.
Well, I think that with the national, really, epidemic of drug use and abuse in this country, there's been a lot more focus on how do we take care of these prescriptions that many people have a legitimate use for. And so it's quite alarming, really, how many of these prescription drugs work their way out into the community where you don't want them. And so the Drug Administration really had to take a good look at how we're prescribing and how we're dispensing of these. And of course, when we started having difficult frogs with 2 and 3 legs or 2 heads, it's not hard to trace that back. So this whole issue of drug disposal and drug abuse has many tentacles on many levels in our communities.
And, you might say, well, geez, nobody in my home is going to abuse the drugs that are just sitting there in your medicine cabinet. Well, that might be true. Maybe it's not true. But the thing is that person who is visiting your house or maybe working at your house, they might have different ideas because that also happens. They might not take the entire bottle. They might just take a few of them because, desperation makes people do desperate things.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, too, because it is hard for us to think about how perhaps our grandson might take a pill. But I'd put a different spin on that, and I would ask us to think back to our own youth when we were in high school and how many of us snuck a cigarette out and back, or how many of us got into the medicine cabinet. The fact of the matter is that with young people, their judgment brain connections are not fully formed, and it is not out of the realm of possibility to think that a good kid, and most of them are good kids, would take even 1 or 2 pills out of your pill bottle and you never miss it. But that 1 or 2 pills is worth a lot of money to them. And it does find its way into our regional high schools. And we know from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that about a third of our students are saying they bought, sold, or were given a pill. That's self-reported information. Local law enforcement estimates that figure much higher, more like 70%. And we also know that across the nation, 70% of the drugs that are going out there to our young people come from local home medicine cabinets.
And there's the other thing is there's money to be made.
There's money to be made.
I do have people in my lives, friends and everything, who are recovered drug addicts or recovering because they don't use. I suppose it's probably a bit like alcohol where you're recovering for eternity. But they tell me the amount of money that somebody can make on even legally prescribed medications, even medications such as Suboxone and such that are actually designed to wean you off of drugs, because there are a lot of people who are addicted who really do want to quit, and so they just said there's all kinds of money to be made out there.
Well, and the drug take-back program that we're running is really aimed at getting these pills off the street so we protect our young people. And getting back to you reminded me that getting back to your point about who gets their little fingers into those drug bottles, it may not be your grandson or your daughter. It may be your daughter's friend. It may be your grandson's friend. It may be I'm sorry, but I don't want to cast aspersions locally, but it could be a local fix-it person, a plumber, a cable guy. There is just it's so easy. It's so easy and quick. And we don't want to think this about people, that they would do that. But as I said, especially when it's a young person, their judgment centers are not completely mature. And they think that you won't miss it, and you don't.
You know what? Now that I'm on the doorsteps of 50, I look back, and I was no angel. I wasn't, I wasn't a horrible kid either.
You're a good kid.
But the thing is, there really didn't seem to be that much for us to get into. There was alcohol, there was pot, and those were pretty much the predominant ones. But now it seems like there's just about there's a whole smorgasbord of drugs for people to get into. And like me as a 50-year-old, I'm thinking, okay, we now know that Oxycontin and heroin and such, we know where that's going to lead to. It isn't, you can't use them really that well recreationally. So that's going to happen. Why start? Why do people start?
Well, I don't think that very happy people who feel a great sense of belonging tend to need those kinds of drugs. So, and nobody I know who is an addict wants to remain an addict. Every addict I know at their core wishes they could quit. And these drugs that you're talking about, very, very hard addictive drugs like heroin and oxycodone and that kind of thing, that kind of addiction sometimes is like the end result of the kind of pill taking I'm talking about. So even if you don't have oxycodone in your cupboard, you may have blood pressure pills, you may have Ativan, you may have Ritalin, you may have even Colace, you may have things that you think are innocuous prescription drugs that you're not using anymore, and they still have a market. So when you go in to clean out your drug cabinet of those drugs, you don't want to just reach for the fentanyl patches. You want to reach for all of the drugs that you are no longer actively using, and you can take them back. My theory, of course, as I said, is it's a national epidemic. It's hard to think about the reasons why people go that route. But I don't think it's any big surprise when you look out and see in the Northeast Kingdom, for example, what a hardy, hardworking, resilient community we have. And yet, for many years, we have struggled. We have really kept our hands on the wheel, but we have struggled. And there's a consequence to that, that over the generations, things look harder for kids. And sometimes they get disillusioned and they just want to quiet it down. So I speculate, that it's my own speculation, that it's a national epidemic and we're not immune.
And it does cut across social economic
Absolutely.
boundaries and even ages, because we've had even a couple very good doctors in this region over the past 20 years. I can think of two very competent doctors who have run into their own issues. And because, these hardcore drugs, they're, in the grand scheme of things, they're relatively new. And some of the older doctors now, when they began, these were just starting to come onto the scenes. The younger doctors, I think they're trained in the dangers of them a lot more, because they've gone to school, when these were out there. Do you get a lot of support, or do you have any connections with the hospital and with the doctors about this topic?
Well, I think all physicians, let me just talk about physicians in this state, are really working hard to connect with other service providers in the community and with pharmacies, looking at their own practice to see how they prescribed, for example, painkillers. And the trend is to not prescribe more than a person needs. And the trend is to educate the patient about how to get rid of these drugs when you're ready, how to throw these out. And you're going to be seeing more of that, because part of this drug take-back project that we have is about education, and it's about getting the community to change its behavior with leftover drugs. So you may, for example, a cooperating physician may include a brochure, or a cooperating pharmacy may put a brochure in a packet of fulfilled prescriptions. So when you take it home, you've got a packet to read that says, this is why you should throw extras away properly, and that you should not leave them hanging around in your house. So it's a matter of, as time goes on, allowing really busy people like physicians and pharmacists and community providers like drug rehab folks to talk with each other about how we can improve on this problem and where each of our responsibility lies.
All right, we talked about why not to put them down the toilet. Why not just put them in the garbage?
Well, when we put them in the garbage, first of all, they go to the landfill, which is not a very good thing either, because that leaches, but also because busy hands and creative minds will pick them out of the garbage. They are worth a lot of money. And if what I really worry about is people who may have someone in their home who is very, very sick, and who rightfully is taking a lot of pain medicines or fentanyl, or people who have cancer and that kind of thing. It's those people, we want to have access to the pain medications that they need, but you don't necessarily want everyone to know you have those drugs in the home. And when you're finished using them, you really need to dispose of them, and it is not in the garbage.
And I suspect that we're also seeing more home invasions because of that. People, whether you have those drugs legally or illegally, if somebody's desperate, like the closest thing to an addiction I have is to my coffee, which I know is nothing compared to alcohol or other forms of drug addictions, or even cigarettes. But
Oh, yeah.
people will do desperate things, and I suspect that a lot of these home invasions are
Yes.
the person's home being invaded might be totally on the up and up, but if somebody has cancer, well, you pretty much are fairly certain that they have some of these drugs.
And I think that local law enforcement, who has been very great to work with on this project so far, local law enforcement will tell you that an increase in break-ins and theft, a lot of that is drug related. With more addictive incidents than what I'm talking about at the high school level. But that, when you have a drug culture, you have more crime. It just goes hand in hand.
Right. Now, when should you clean out your medicine cabinet? Because it seems like, I hate to say it, I think a lot of us, we didn't quite finish that prescription. We'll save it for next time. Well, there's two things wrong with that, particularly like with even antibiotics. If you're not finishing,
What a good point.
If you're not finishing your antibiotics, well, you just might be just not killing whatever it's trying to kill, and you might be beefing it up a bit. But when should you get rid of?
Well, I think most practitioners would tell you that you should take the drugs that you are prescribed according to what the label says. And if you don't finish them and you have some left over, you should dispose of them at a take-back center. And there were two that we can talk about today. But there are a number of reasons for that. The one I'm concerned about is I don't want it to get into younger hands or unauthorized hands. But also, drugs that age lose their potency. And they also can have adverse effects as they break down. So you should, in my opinion, take care of your drugs when you are finished with that course of treatment. Now, is this hard? You bet, because I grew up in this area too, and I grew up as the child of parents in the Depression, and I don't throw things away.
Right.
So when you pay good money for a drug, you are loath to throw that away if there's any left.
Because you might need it.
You might need it.
Yeah, right.
But the fact of the matter is you're placing yourself in a predicament, and you really should take care of them. And I would say this. I would say that all of us are concerned about our community and the health and well-being of our community and how our kids are growing up. And it's overwhelming sometimes when we think about all of the dangers and the social issues out there. And we think, what can I do? This is something we can all do. This is something that makes an impact. It's easy to do, and we can all do it. It's our way of individuals contributing to dealing with this issue.
And as you touched upon, some of the drugs, like we all, most people now know painkillers such as Oxycontin and even muscle relaxants. Those can be abused, but there's other drugs that maybe you would know about just because of your work. But there's a lot of drugs out there that most people wouldn't even fathom that could be
true enough
be abused because they have all kinds of concoctions and things they can do.
True enough. Sheriff Martin was telling me in an interview that we did the other day that he knows kids who have these drug parties where they throw all of the pills into a bowl, and they end up with this big bowl of colored pills, and they just start taking them.
And there's nothing that clicks in. This isn't very smart.
What can I say? What? As I said, go back to the idea that when we are kids, we try to get away with things, and we don't understand our own mortality. We think we're going to last forever with that vigor. And when you and I were kids, we got away with a few things as well. It's just that the idea, it's a different world,
right,
in terms of dangers that are out there.
Yeah, because along with because these drugs, for the most part, were made for very good purposes.
Oh, absolutely.
But the thing is along with them, comes those dangers. No, we only have about 10 more minutes left. Where can somebody get rid of their unused drugs?
Great. So this is where I really want people to pay attention. Now, with the Orleans County Sheriff's Office, we gave them a secure med collection box. It looks like a post office box, and you can go in anytime during working hours, and you just tell the dispatcher on duty, who is very friendly, I just want to get rid of my drugs. So this is how I did it. I just threw all my drugs in a plastic bag and threw them in the bin, and that's it. They don't look and see what they are. They don't look and see what the name is. It's anonymous in that respect. If I had wanted to, I could have taken these all out of the little bottles and just thrown the pills in there.
And they can be even like aspirin.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What they shouldn't be is they really don't have the capacity to take liquids, and they really don't want to take needles. And that is for their own safety, and because sometimes a liquid will burst and then you have it all over the bin. But it's very, very easy to do. You can drop it off on your way to grocery shop or whatever. They're friendly.
And to the people who don't know where the sheriff's department is, because there's still people who think the sheriff's department is located off of Main Street in Newport. It's now located on the Derby Road, and because of where the line is, most people think it's in Newport. It's actually in Derby, and but it's right on the Derby Road. And where's the other place?
And the other place that we know of is, of course, at the Newport City Police Department. Now, Seth will take this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because his aim, of course, is to just get them off the street. A little bit different process there in that they don't have as conveniently situated a drug box, and so they may have an officer just come out and watch you put it in. But that's it. He doesn't care what it says. He doesn't care what kind it is. He doesn't care who you are. He wants to get these things off the street.
Well, here's a little side note about Chief DeSanto. Just as long as he doesn't take away my coffee. Do you know that man has never tasted coffee?
That's a surprise to me.
Good
for him.
Yeah, never drank. He's been on my show a couple times, but no, good guy. Now, what about the hospital? Because so much of the drugs, for good or bad, they come out of the hospital. Do they have a drop area yet?
They don't, to my knowledge, and we may be able to work with them on that a bit. The issue is that the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, has had very, very strict rules about how you can take drugs in and dispose of them. And because they're afraid that the chain of possession is going to be broken. And so they have recently loosened those up. And we're waiting for the Vermont DEA to get on board so that perhaps we can approach some pharmacies and the hospital about being more convenient for consumers.
Until recently, at least, it seems to me I've read that you can bring them into a pharmacy and hand them over. Is that true or not?
Well, I would need a pharmacist to advise that on that particular point, but my understanding is that that is not the case.
Okay, all right.
Unless they are having a specific drug take-back event, because right now the rules are that the receptacle has to be in a place where there is a law enforcement official.
Okay. Do you ever, I know this is a bit off the topic, but do you ever think we just have too many drugs? Because, I think we're in a similar age area. I just don't remember being so saturated with, I remember there was the aspirin, but then with Rye syndrome, you had to switch to Tylenol or something. But I just don't recall being bombarded with drugs. But on the other hand, I think we were also dying of things that we don't die from now because of those drugs.
Right. Well, I try not to judge because I've been in circumstances where I've had family members who have been extremely ill, and I was so grateful that there were powerful drugs because that's who those drugs are for.
Right.
But it's an industry, and it is an industry which has to stay ahead of its own game all the time. And so, on the one hand, we're grateful that we are gaining ground in terms of treating people. And on the other hand, if you're like me and you, and we grew up in the environment we did, we're reluctant sometimes to take some medications. But I don't really want to judge because someone who's in pain, there's no big virtue in that either.
I had a brother-in-law. He was dying of cancer at 49, young man. He was a logger, so he knew what hard work was, and he knew he was dying. There wasn't any doubt about it. But he did not want to become addicted to his pain pills. And even though he knew he was dying, he was so adverse to taking anything for pain because you're supposed to suck it up. And now I think we've kind of gone almost the opposite direction a bit. But no, I think what you're doing is a good thing now, getting people to do it.
Right. And I think after Christmas, people will find a lot more information out in their walk through the day that will remind them to take these drugs back, take them back safely. I know the Department of Health is also doing a little educational campaign, and we are as well, with brochures, and I'd be happy to come and talk with any group of people who would like to know more about this. But my main message today is take the drugs back, take them to Orleans County Sheriff, take them to Newport Police Department, ask your provider how to dispose of these drugs. And in these two cases, please no needles or liquids.
Right. Okay, how can somebody contact you? And Todd will put it up on the screen.
Okay, so I'm at Orleans County Restorative Justice Center, and we are on the web at www.kingdomjustice.org. We are also available at 487-9327. That's my phone number. I'd be happy to talk with anyone. And my email address is bmorrow@kingdomjustice.org. BMORROW@kingdomjustice.org.
And maybe in the new year we'll have you come on, and maybe other members of your group, to talk about the restorative justice program.
Oh, I would love that.
And we'll do that today. We just touched a little bit on what you're doing, and as I said, I think it's a good thing because, to be honest, if I went home, I'm not much into medications, but over time, you do get a collection of stuff, and I bet you I would find things that don't belong there.
Veterinary medicines, by the way, as well.
Oh yeah,
going to be all very potent.
No, that's true, and I just think I think a lot of people just are not aware because we don't open up that medicine cabinet unless a lot of times unless we have something wrong with us. I have been blessed with good health, so I don't open it up very often.
Good for you.
So all right, well,
thank you so much,
and thank you for coming on, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Great.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.